we got a 12-team Dynasty Superflex startup mock draft with rookies. That's a mouthful, but I got even more for you. We included some big name experts on this. No CPUs, no NPCs, no auto drafting, none of that. We got some great experts in this. We'll mention their names as we go along for this. It was Superflex, like I mentioned. We included the rookies. With the roster spots looked like this: 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex, and then we had a 3rd round reversal. Okay, no other shenanigans outside of that. Now, what I will say is this, is I know that a lot of you on the audio feed, and I agree with this, mock drafts are just hard to follow along. Even when you're watching on video, you're just like, how am I supposed to see those tiny little boxes there on the board? We're not doing the traditional follow along with the mock draft here, okay? What we want to do is we want to make this valuable for all of our audiences, right? And we want to talk about our biggest takeaways from how this draft went. So we did something fun here. We're doing kind of a draft superlatives, like the senior class yearbook. We're most likely to succeed, most likely to whatever. And we kind of went with some fun categories here. So I want to just kick us off here with our first category: the player that is most likely to be the cornerstone of my team. And just to give you guys the idea of how we did this, I was at pick 6, Dave, you were at 8, Joey at 10, and Jagger at 11. So, Dave, why don't you kick us off with the player most likely to be the cornerstone of your team? And I just have a feeling it's probably going to be all of our early guys that we picked in either round 1 or 2.
Yeah, and my first round pick was Justin Herbert, and I think that's the obvious guy. And I will say there's some concerns with Justin Herbert at 108. We talked about him a couple weeks ago on our Dynasty Sell High show, and I recommended Justin Herbert as a sell high. We don't know what this new offense is going to look like with Harbaugh there. Things are going to change a little bit. We're not going to see this, record-breaking pace to start his career with pass attempts like we saw through his first few years. But for me, the guy that I think is the cornerstone is Caleb Williams, the guy I got in round 2. If you look at that ADP where I got him at 205, that's pretty much the same spot last year that CJ Stroud was going, and Bryce Young was going a little bit before that, and Anthony Richardson was going before that as well. Those guys were all going in the early 2nd round. I was shocked that Caleb Williams fell here because I've got him in my rankings right alongside Justin Herbert. So again, not trying to, talk smack about anybody else's draft here, but, I like what you did, Jagger, with Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields. And Joey, I like what you did with Kyler Murray, but I would prefer Caleb Williams ahead of all of those guys. I didn't expect him to make it back to me at 205.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he got to you at 205. I was sitting there just holding out hope because it was 2 picks away, and I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll get him. But yeah, Dave, that's a great pick, and you did tend to go a little bit younger here. Joey, you're next up on here. The player most likely to be the cornerstone of your team, and Dave just did something to you that he always does to me, which is you're about to make a point about a player you really liked, and he just pooped all over them.
See, here's the thing. I don't listen to what Dave says when he talks, so I didn't hear what he said. So I'm completely oblivious to what I'm about to say. No, I mean, I think you could say that CeeDee Lamb would be it, but I look at that cornerstone. That word for me means safe. And CeeDee Lamb for me, okay, yeah, he was the wide receiver 1 last year, but does he repeat as that? I'm not sure. I see like 5 or 6 guys that I think could be the wide receiver 1. I feel safest with Kyler Murray. The last 5 seasons in the league, he's been a top 12 quarterback in points per game. I feel safe with that. I know what I'm getting. He's got that rushing floor. Coming into 2024 as well, he's got a breakout tight end. And a lot of the mocks you see have Marvin Harrison Jr. going to Arizona. If that happens, Kyler Murray easily could be a top 5, if not top 3 quarterback in the league. He's still young. He's 26. He's a year younger than Dak Prescott, who went 25 picks earlier than Kyler Murray did. I love Kyler Murray on my team. I'm happy to call him the cornerstone.
So I like Kyler Murray as well. I think it's a great pick. I think that just overall, everybody's a little bit too low on Kyler Murray. I mean, he came back from an ACL tear and was still rushing all over the place and being a productive passer. And he's still just 25, 26 years old. So I like the pick. Jagger, Joey, we kind of know where you stand, choosing guys ahead. But Alfredo, I want to ask you, Caleb Williams or Kyler Murray, which way would you lean?
Oh boy.
Totally putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I would go Caleb here, Dave. I really love the study that you did on number 1 overall picks. I think it speaks volumes.
Kyler is one of them.
Yeah, I know. But the thing is that kind of makes them equal then, I think, at this point, right? And you've got a guy that is going to have a bit of a longer leash, whereas in Arizona, you kind of have this new staff, a new regime. There seems to be a lot of in and outs there. I wouldn't fault anyone for taking Kyler over him because I think you got the rushing upside there. You're probably getting Marvin Harrison Jr. joining as well. But I just think just for the name value alone, the trade value alone, the age, all the things that go with it, I'd probably take Caleb Williams, but I'm going to say it's probably a one spot difference, like just ahead of Kyler.
Can I say why I didn't take Caleb because he was in my queue?
No,
going
let's
no,
hear it.
you're
I'm
not.
gonna
No,
ask it.
Let's hear it.
no,
Um,
we don't want to hear it.
I don't want to necessarily have a rookie quarterback as my QB1. I want to have someone I know that I've seen what they've done on the field. I think Caleb Williams is kind of a sure thing to hit, but I thought Ryan Leaf was many, many years ago, mainly because we went to the same high school. But outside
You
of
are
that,
so old. You are
I
so
am.
impossibly
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
And I want to say
high
that might
school.
be why I was able to kind of steal Caleb Williams where I did. Because if you look at this draft board, the two people that picked before me were Joey and Jay, and they went with Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb in the first round. So I think Jay might have had the same kind of ideology as you, where he didn't want a rookie to be his QB1. Me already taking Herbert, I'm drafting Caleb Williams as my QB2, which means I'm allowed to kind of take a little bit of a swing there. So maybe that's why just the way the board kind of shook out with Lamb and Chase going where they did, why I was able to get Caleb Williams in round 2.
Let's move on to Jagger now, because your whole team is kind of like the upside draft. I'm looking through the roster here. How did you find someone on your team that you just have confidence in as being that cornerstone for years to come?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields aren't like I would say the safest bets, but I think it's Anthony Richardson for the sole fact that in limited action we already saw him realize that upside. So my biggest enemy, I think, is injury. He has a good system. He has good weapons around him. I don't think Michael Pittman is going to leave the room, and I think that there's enough wide receivers that I wouldn't be surprised if they dip in again. Maybe bring in a tight end. And again, like you said, it's upside for me. If I'm building a real NFL team, I'd pick Caleb Williams. But if I'm building a fantasy team, I want Anthony Richardson first. And then just kind of piggyback off what Joey said. One reason why I would pick Justin Fields is exactly what he said, is I at least know what he can do right now. And if I want a competitive roster, I'd rather bet on Fields. Even if he's, let's say, not a good quarterback, I know that he's going to get 50 rushing yards a game and at least make up a lot of that somehow. And whether he's in Chicago, whether he's in Atlanta or something, to me, there's very, very little evidence that he's going to be worse than he was this year, barring an injury. He's undoubtedly going to go to a better situation. So with all that being said, Anthony Richardson is a guy that I'm betting on. If I get to pick my draft slot, I'm picking the 111, 110 around that end because I love Kyler Murray. I love Fields, love Richardson, love Caleb Williams. I probably would pick Caleb Williams over Trevor Lawrence, just FYI. So
I have a very important question to ask right now, Jagger. Who is Anthony Richardson? Oh, I just keep hearing you say Richardson. Dave's laughing because I think he hears it too.
Oh, Richardson. Sorry.
Am I the only one hearing Richardson?
I didn't hear Richardson, but
No,
did
it land at all?
What? Edit that out,
land.
Julia. Cut that joke.
So I like Richardson at 111. We like everything that we had hoped he would be. A lot of people were drafting him as the QB1 in Dynasty rookie drafts last year, and saw it on a very small sample size, but he completely lived up to the hype with the rushing upside, still pushing the ball downfield through the air as well. He actually led the league, and again, small sample size, 4 or 5 games, whatever it was, but he led the league in fantasy points per drop back, which is very predictive of future fantasy points. So basically, as long as Anthony Richardson is playing and dropping back and getting the football in his hand, he's going to score fantasy points. So I do really, really like that pick there. The one concern I have, and this is just nitpicking, I think he's absolutely deserves to be a first-round startup pick, is that he can fully come back from that shoulder injury. That was a brutal injury. I think that once we see some camp clips of him throw in with that same spring in his throw, then he'll be a much safer pick. But that's a tough shoulder injury to come back from, and I think that's what I want to see, is that he is 100% recovered before I feel completely comfortable taking him in Dynasty.
Okay, and I'm going to keep mine quick here. My cornerstone player, it was kind of by default here. I was at pick 6. I ended up with Joe Burrow, quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. And it kind of similar to how Jagger said, my enemy here is injury. when Joe Burrow's healthy, he's good. He's a top 7, top 5, top whatever quarterback that you're looking at. He's been quarterback 7 in 2021, quarterback 4 in 2022. T. Higgins getting the franchise tag, it seems like they do want to try to work something out there long term. And I'll say this, even if he is gone, I just kind of love the fact that Joe Burrow is tied to Ja'Marr Chase for as long as they're going to be. And this is going to remain a pass-first offense. I do get that there might be some concerns about, was it Brian Callahan heading off to Tennessee? So I get if someone maybe doesn't want to take him there, but at least looking at our draft board, where I took Joe Burrow over Jalen Hurts, and Dave, your pick, Justin Herbert. So I think I would stick with Joe Burrow being there.
I think the Brian Callahan leaving has been overblown a little bit. It's not like
Yeah.
Brian Callahan was this like super innovative offensive
Yeah.
mind. Like he was
Right.
pounding Joe Mixon between the tackles and throwing slants to Ja'Marr Chase. Like I think just about any offensive coordinator that they have going forward is going to be, if not lateral, a move forward. I don't know. I hear a lot of people talk about that. You know, what's it going to look like without Brian Callahan there? It's not like they're losing some genius offensive coordinator, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor
Yeah.
runs
Yeah.
he runs a Madden, 15-year-old Madden player team. Let's run halfback smash and then fades. That's just like what he's gonna do. So my thing is, Alfred, I want to ask you, why Joe Burrow over Jalen Hurts in fantasy?
I think that there is more of the investment long term in Joe Burrow. I think that the Bengals, the Bengals are going to be really hard pressed to move on from Joe Burrow, where the vibes in Philly right now kind of suck to the point where people were calling for the head coach to be fired, and people were saying maybe we should be looking at a quarterback this year. And there's just so many bad vibes around Philly right now that I get it. Jalen Hurts is great for fantasy, and there's not a huge difference between them. But if I have to pick, I just kind of want to go with the guy that I know is probably going to be the starting quarterback for his team for at least another 2 to 3 seasons at worst with Joe Burrow. Whereas maybe Jalen Hurts doesn't make it the next couple seasons. The Philly faithful are not very patient.
But that's what I think you just brought your point back is, aren't those always the vibes in Philadelphia if they're not winning a Super Bowl?
Yes.
They're always cranky and complaining.
fair.
Like, I don't know.
It's hard to not take notice of what the Eagles did down the stretch, though. I mean, they just absolutely melted in the second half. And, I've talked about it a few times on this show where Nick Bosa kind of jokingly said, like, we laid out the blueprint on how to stop Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. And from that game forward, every team stopped Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. So I don't think it's crazy to take
how
Burrow
different
ahead of Hurts.
How different did the Eagles team look this past year without Shane Steichen? And we saw how much better the Colts looked. So kind of going back to the Callahan thing, I know some coordinators or coaches leaving doesn't really make a difference, but we saw that one really did. So that's why I kind of just keep lingering on the vibes in Philly.
And maybe
awesome.
Hurts was just injured. We saw him limping around. We saw him with the knee brace. Maybe we're making something out of nothing. Maybe he was just injured and he bounces back to the elite player we saw last year, or I guess 2 years ago. I still get confused on like what's this year, what's next year, what's last year at this time of the season. But maybe
it's 2024.
Maybe he can bounce back to what we saw in 2022. But it's really tough for me to ignore what we saw in the second half of the season. So I've put Burrow ahead of Hurts in my dynasty rankings.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that two things can be true. The offense looked worse, and Hurts was hurt. So
yeah.
All right, let's move on here to the pick that I immediately regretted. Okay, each of us are going to select the player that, and it was funny, we were all kind of laughing before the show. It's like, I had a great draft. I didn't regret any of these picks. I'm a fantasy god. Like, we all just kind of really loved our own teams. But I think this happens all the time, where there's that one player you take, and after fantasy drafts, you look at your board and you're just like, man, my team's awesome. And then a week down the line, you're like, man, I really wish I didn't pick that guy where I did. So we're just going to speed up that engine a little bit. Dave, on your roster right now, who is the pick that you immediately regretted?
In the 6th round, I had my eyes on 2 players, Kenneth Walker and Jayden Reed, and they both went directly before my pick. So I pivoted there and I took James Cook. And it's not that I dislike James Cook. I think that he's going to be a fine RB1 going forward. We saw especially when they made the switch at offensive coordinator last year that James Cook became a very good RB1 in fantasy, but he's not typically a running back that I want to take that early. So I took James Cook. And if you look at the next couple of picks, nobody I was too crazy about. Saquon Barkley went off the board. Isaiah Pacheco went off the board. You got some aging receivers, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin. But when I really regretted taking James Cook was when it wrapped back around to me in the 7th round and Rachaad White was still on the board. I don't have a huge difference in my rankings between James Cook and Rachaad White. So I think that's why I regretted the James Cook pick, is that I could have taken somebody else in the 6th round and just taken Rachaad White in the 7th. So, it's tough saying what pick you regret, because at the end of the day, we're making these picks and we like the players that we pick. But in hindsight, after letting him marinate for a few days, not crazy about James Cook in the end of the 6th.
I'll say this: I liked your James Cook pick. I was considering him as well, and
I would
I think
Jayden Reed better. You want to make a trade? Or
Well,
no,
I don't
no,
have
no,
Jayden. I
sorry,
don't have
Jeff
Jayden
took
Reed.
Jayden Reed.
Yeah, I will. So actually, it's funny. The 3 guys that went, I took Kenneth Walker at the 606. Jayden Reed goes to 607 to Jeff Bell, and then you took James Cook at the 608. Those were all the 3 guys that I was considering, and Kenneth Walker just felt like the best value out of the 3 of them, so that's where I went. But I don't hate your James Cook selection there, Dave. I think that's, in my opinion, a really big step up from Rachaad White. I don't know how you guys feel. Joey, you're our resident Buccaneers fan. Do you feel like James Cook is a big step up from Rachaad White in Dynasty, or no?
I think it's pretty lateral. I I think Rachaad White is so good because Baker checks down to his running backs a lot. I'm not the hugest Rachaad White fan. I think we could have a lot better running back. I just think he benefits from what Baker does on the field.
But then honestly, looking at the other players that went off the board after James Cook, the guy that I had next in my queue is who I would have taken in the 7th round anyway, which is Baker Mayfield. And I think that's just, I would have preferred Baker Mayfield and Rachaad White to have that stack as opposed to
fun.
James Cook and Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Joey, do you think, because the Bucs, they were 32nd in rushing, do you think they go out and they get another running back, then that kind of cuts into the value here of Rachaad White? I know he's still going to get his receiving work, but we're maybe looking at a guy now with limited upside. He's probably not going to get those touchdowns because someone else is coming in and stealing some work.
I just think, what running back is that going to be? If it's like Jonathan Brooks, I'm very scared for Rachaad White. I don't think it's going to be anyone upon Brooks' level. I think what Rachaad White showed us is that he can play in the NFL. He's a starting running back. I think we could have better on the Bucs, but we could have better at every position if we think about that.
All right, well, Joey, since I've already got you in sad, depressed mode,
Mm-hmm.
why don't I ask you which pick you immediately regretted after making it?
So the pick I regretted was a mistake because of who I was drafting next to. I know how much Jagger likes Keenan Allen. I should have taken Keenan Allen before Amari Cooper because I wanted both of them. And I was like, I'm going to take Amari Cooper first. He's younger. That was a mistake that I made. I like Keenan a lot better. I'd rather have him as my wide receiver 4 than Amari Cooper. It was just a mistake in who I was drafting with, which I think we'll get to later in our post-draft takeaways. It's my biggest takeaway. Like, knowing who you're drafting with is kind of half the battle in a lot of ways.
Well, I will say with Bob Harris at the turn and kind of the way that he built his team, I don't think Keenan Allen would have made it past him. So unless, you would have needed to take Keenan Allen there, because I don't think there was any way he was coming back to you with your next pick.
Yeah.
Because if he's drafting Mike Williams, he's drafting Keenan Allen. Let's put it that way.
All right, Jagger, let's get to you. Which pick did you regret here? And this just seems to be a very Jagger reasoning on this.
Believe it or not, I've already pivoted off this because I've looked at the board.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm deviating from this sheet. I
love it.
Initially said Etienne, but looking at the board, I don't think I could have got Rashee Rice or something else. So I'd rather have the value. It's David Montgomery that I regret. I love some money, but looking at the rest of the board and how I've built, to give you, especially the audio listeners, context, in the 6th round, I took Troy Franklin. In the 7th round, I took Brian Thomas. I would have rather have had Terry McLaurin and Keenan Allen, or something along a little bit better bet, and then get Jonathan Brooks or Braylon Allen, any of these young guys later as an RB2. Because I got Trey Benson in the 11th round. I didn't need David Montgomery right there. So I think that's the biggest regret. And my biggest lesson to anyone out there, it's I know Jeff Bell talks about this a lot. You don't need all young guys in Dynasty. Like, if you get a good blend, like I have of Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas, double tap those older guys, and then you have a roster built for now and the future. And I didn't do that because of my money love. So,
Except it's funny you bring up Jeff Bell because his roster is almost exclusively rookies. And he's like, no, don't worry. You don't have to get young guys.
Speaking
Yeah.
of, if you haven't already, download the Football Guys Rookie Guide.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's awesome. How many? They have like, what, 150 something draft
152.
profiles in it?
Yeah, and they're going to add
152.
more post combine. They're going to add more
Mhm.
post draft. But I think they got all but like 2 players that were invited to the combine on their first pass. These guys went deep. Footballguys.com/rookie guide. It's one of the best pieces of content out there, and it's free right now. So feel obligated to talk about that when we're talking about Jeff Bell and the rookies he drafted. That is an awesome, awesome guide.
Yeah. So free rookie guide. We're going to have the link in the YouTube and podcast description. So all you have to do is open that up. You'll be able to click the link right there. I'm going to finish us off here with the player that I immediately regretted drafting. And it's not necessarily because of the player, because it was a good value, but it's Ken Walker for me. I got him as the RB9 in this draft in round 6, which is kind of spot on where you're seeing him go in dynasty startup drafts. But I think for me, it was more so that now I was almost making a commitment to him being a fully kind of running back team where I had 3 running backs and no wide receiver, which I can see Jagger just visibly getting the ick as I speak. I think he wants to quit from Football Guys at this moment.
Hold on, I'm Googling getting the ick on Urban Dictionary right now.
There you go. Good job, Grandpa. Good job, Grandpa.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I probably would have gone with Jayden Reed there. Like going back in hindsight, just because I felt like my team would have been a little bit more balanced. And honestly, I don't, as much as I've been the champion for Ken Walker, I don't know how much longer this run continues, no pun intended, because Zach Charbonnet is there. I think that a lot of what held him back was just simply being a rookie and Pete Carroll and what was going on. And we don't know exactly what the future holds for the running backs there in Seattle. So I think that going with him as my RB3 in the 6th round, it's a little excessive. It's kind of like ordering a salad at a bar.
Got him.
Yay. All right. You saw how I waited for applause. I waited for laughter, waited for applause.
Yeah.
That's showbiz, baby.
Stand up 101.
All right, let's go on to our next here. And this happens to everyone. This is the universal thing that happens at dynasty drafts, redrafts, best ball drafts, anything. It's the one that got away. The player you got sniped on, the player that you were just like waiting for them, and then boom, they go just a few picks before you. Dave, let's start with you.
I was destroyed that I got sniped on T. Higgins. First of all, I couldn't believe that T. Higgins fell to 504. I thought that was a great value that Jay Stein was able to get T. Higgins at. And I'm not necessarily upset with taking Jackson Smith-Njigba the pick after, but I prefer T. Higgins to Jackson Smith-Njigba by quite a large margin. So I saw him sitting there in my queue. He kept dropping, getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and then sniped the pick before me. I don't understand why we've soured. Well, I should take that back. I understand why we've soured on T. Higgins. He was hurt last year. In the few games that he does play through injuries, he's essentially a non-factor. We see that where you put him in your starting lineup and he goes out and gives you a goose egg. But he's still T. Higgins. You know, he's young, he's talented, he's one of the best contested catch receivers in the league. He's coming off of a down season, but if he's fallen that far in ADP now or that far in drafts where you can get him in the early 5th round, I was ecstatic at the idea of adding T. Higgins as my wide receiver 3. Okay, settling with JSN, but man, that was tough to see him go the pick before me.
I'm having a brain fart here. Did we do this draft prior to T. Higgins getting the franchise tag?
Yes.
Okay,
we did.
So yeah, so I'm going to assume that has a little bit to do with it. Probably not too much because I think people are still a little down after the season he had, but I think that has a little bit to just kind of that uneasiness going into the off season. Joey, your player, the one that got away, and my word, does this not surprise me one bit?
Well, so here's the thing. My player that got away, like my team might be better because I didn't get him. My consolation prize was Breece Hall. I wanted Jahmyr Gibbs. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. He's my dynasty wide running back 1. I just love what he's done last year. 2nd in rushes of 20 yards or more in the league. 2nd in touchdowns in the last 10 games. I loved everything I saw to Jahmyr Gibbs. I've just bought into this Lions offense. But getting Breece Hall, like I said, my team might be better because I got who was a lot of people's dynasty running back 1. But you know, one of the things about fantasy is getting the guys you like. And if you're between 2 guys, you know, getting the player that you just like there's something to that. You'll have a little bit more fun. And I think that's left out of fantasy a little bit. I know we got to win, but let's have fun too.
Question, if you could,
Yeah.
how many Lions players would you draft on a single team? This is actually a serious question because you talk about drafting players you like. How many players from the same team, let's call it the Lions, would you actually draft?
So at the right value, I'm fine with 4 on my roster where I would have to start them, and then I'll pivot that bye week. I don't care about bye weeks. I really don't. And that's what I learned last year. It's my biggest takeaway from fantasy last year is if you're in on an offense, just go in on it and worry about that 1 week when you get to it. Like truthfully, because one loss, no one's going to go 14-0 on a season. I mean, you'll find that, but most likely than not, you can win with a 9-6. Did I do the weeks right? No, 9-5 roster.
That's
and the thing
that's
is, the
week
Lions are an
14 Joey's problem.
Yes. That's how I live life. That's tomorrow Alfredo's problem. Yep.
Yeah.
The Lions, they're an offensive powerhouse. I mean, they're going to put up a lot. Like, you don't want to put all of your eggs in a small basket, but the Lions, they're going to have a lot to go around. And realistically, like if you look at how ADP kind of falls, you can start your draft with Amon St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then get Sam LaPorta in round 3, and then wait until round 6 or 7 and get Jared Goff. That would be fun, going all in and just having a Lions, super stack.
I'm wearing the baby blue too. I'm ready to go.
Joey's getting the vapors over there.
Oh, my stars.
I declare.
All right. Jag, who is the one player that got away from you?
I don't like drafting near Dave. Like 3 spots isn't far enough.
I don't like recording with Dave, but here we are.
Jahan Dotson was one that I've been drafting with a lot of people who hate Jahan Dotson, so it's felt really good getting him for nothing. And I was ready to click the button, and then Dave took him. People have been really down on Dotson, and I get that he had touchdown clone or whatever, but he's a first round pick wide receiver. I think that, especially his tape and college tape, he's an objectively good player. I don't understand why we're this down on Jahan Dotson when Terry McLaurin wasn't good either. That whole offense was bad. Sam Howell's probably not good. I don't think Eric Bieniemy's is any good. We know Ron Rivera's not good. So why is Jahan Dotson this one little doo-doo stain on the underwear that is the Washington Commanders? I don't get it. So, he swapped shirts. Okay.
I was wondering what Dave was doing. He changed it to his Jahan Dotson shirt.
It was a gift from Joey Wright, one of my most prized possessions.
The good thing is that it distracts from the mustache.
Yeah.
Because I'm
I
so
think it
tired
just
of looking.
draws attention. It's like the sun just shining upon it.
Yeah, this bright yellow really looks good on my pale winter skin.
If it was
Dave,
a crop
stay away.
top, you would just look like an 80s workout guy or something, just rocking a crop top. You look like Tom Selleck or something.
It's Hulk Hogan yellow is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to grow it down. Get the rest of the stash.
Why'd you snipe me, brother?
Jahan Dotson, brother. Oh man.
Yeah, I was happy to get Jahan Dotson.
I hate what's happened to Dave.
Dave doesn't go outside a lot. You could tell.
Well, now he can't. He gets too close to his school. All right, Dave, you were going to say something about Jahan Dotson before, we kind of all freaked out about your stash and your shirt.
I just think he's a great pick. I love it. And I love that it got under Jagger's skin here. I mean, Jahan Dotson is still a young guy. I didn't really catch all of what he had to say, but yeah, he scored a lot of touchdowns and everyone says, oh, well, that's, just something that you can't do again, but he might not, but he's still a good player, still 23 years old. And he is one of those guys, right now, Washington's sitting at number 2 in the draft. If they draft a quarterback, he's going to jump from a 10th or 11th round ADP into a 7th or an 8th round ADP because everyone's going to get excited about the thoughts of him with a new quarterback. Jagger, did you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but besides the new quarterback thing, I just basically said that everyone sucked, and I don't know why Jahan Dotson is taking a lot of heat. So,
but tell me, I mean, I don't know who's going to be number 2, whether it's Drake May, Jayden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, who knows at this point. But as soon as they draft a QB at 2, his value is going to skyrocket.
Yeah.
If somehow the Commanders end up with Caleb Williams, whether it's a trade from 2 to 1 or something like that, Dave's shaking his head, but let's just do this for the sake of content. what does that do to Jahan? Is there a big difference for Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin if it's Caleb Williams over a Drake May or a Jayden Daniels? Joey?
Absolutely. I think you would be looking at almost, what, 2-round difference, would you say, with Jahan Dotson if it's Caleb Williams? Whether that's where he belongs or not, but I think that's how far his ADP could shoot up.
Yeah, I think we're looking at Jahan Dotson. Yeah, probably is a 6th, 7th round pick if they somehow land Caleb Williams.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is I'm kind of looking at the draft board here, and I think that we've gotten so used to second-year wide receivers being really, really good and continuing to ascend. And last year we kind of saw where second-year wide receivers were just okay, or some of them even maybe got worse from a production standpoint. I'm looking at the guys that went here. I think, I mean, if we want to look at round 8, where it's George Pickens and then Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson. I did not
I mean,
intend
even
for that to
earlier,
rhyme.
Garrett
Jameson
Wilson
Williams.
and Chris Olave. I mean, like, people are still
Mhm.
holding on to them in a 2nd round ADP, but they were, all intents and purposes, kind of disappointing last year.
I'll still
Yeah,
take
I mean-
Garrett Wilson 2nd round. Chris
Oh,
Olave.
I
Yeah,
will.
I
I
would
will
too,
too. Don't get me wrong. Like,
Yeah.
we understand why, but from a production standpoint, it was disappointing.
So let me ask this question then. Like, amongst the guys that I listed here, Pickens, Watson, Dotson, I mean, just for Joey and my sake, let's throw in Jameson Williams there, and even like Treylon Burks. Who's the guy that we think is probably going to end up having the best season next year? I know it's probably too early to tell, but if there's one of those guys, a 3rd-year wide receiver that we think can recover or trend back in the right direction, who is it?
I want to say Dotson.
Yeah, Dave. Jagger, who do you think?
If you want to go like biggest like room to climb, it's Dotson. Like obvious one would be like Garrett Wilson or something like that. But like Dotson has gone from unstartable, people dropping him even in Dynasty, to I think like Dave said, he's going to be climbing up draft boards again. So,
But also,
Joey?
if they ship Deontay out of Pittsburgh, it could be Pickens too. He's another guy.
That's what I was going to say. I
Yeah.
believe Pickens was 3rd in the league in yards per target the last 2
Mhm.
seasons. Like, that's insane. If they get a quarterback that can actually get him the ball, like, I see really great things for George Pickens for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw the name back out there of Christian Watson, where he was before last season. I know the face, and I'm not here like getting on my soapbox for him, because the thing is, he's not a bad player, right? He's not a bad player. I think we can all agree on that. What we hate is the way he is consistently getting hurt the same way, and we hate that Jayden Reed has now kind of hopped into this role where he kind of became the lead wide receiver there. But I do think Jordan Love is good enough to support more than one target, and I think we're a little too quick to dismiss some of these guys. Seeing Christian Watson go at the end of round 8, I mean, it's actually pretty surprising. He's going in the same spot as guys like Xavier Worthy and Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, these rookies that maybe they're not bad, but I think I'd rather have Christian Watson over them, just because, like you guys said earlier, we've seen him do it, even in just the first year in the league.
Yeah, my
Christian
concern with
Watson go to
Christian
North
Watson
Dakota
is that his
State?
hamstrings are just like made of slow cooked chicken. Like, they're just falling
Yeah.
apart. Like, he's got nothing keeping that leg together right now. And for a guy like that, like, he needs those hamstrings. Like, his entire game is predicated on game breaking speed. And if he doesn't have that speed, or if he's going to keep injuring himself getting to that top speed, that's what concerns me, because he doesn't have the polish and the finesse of a guy that can win in other ways. He's only winning by getting deep downfield.
I think Christian Watson is who people who hate Jahan Dotson think Jahan Dotson is, if that makes sense. Like his first season, it was a lot of touchdown cologne. And then when you think about reception perception, which is concrete data you can look at, not just me looking at film, Jahan Dotson beats cornerbacks and he beats the defensive backs with skill. Christian Watson is all athleticism, and that only gets you so far. He's not DK Metcalf, so I can't draft him. So sorry, Alfredo, I can't get behind you. You're alone.
Like I said, I'm not getting on my soapbox. I'm not propping him up a couple rounds, but I'm saying for him to be on kind of that 9th round turn, I think we're burying him a little early. By the way, shout out to Matt Harmon, former football guy. Reception perception, nicely done there, Jagger. I'm going to finish us off here with the pick, the one that got away for me. Jayden Daniels, the rookie quarterback, he went 1 pick before me in the 3rd round. And I do honestly believe that is what changed the entire trajectory of my draft, because right after Jayden Daniels went off the board, I was like, okay, what do I do now? Oh, hey, that's Christian McCaffrey. I'll take him at the 307. And I started off with the nearly never coveted and rarely seen 1 quarterback, 2 running back start in a dynasty super flex. And Jagger just laughed the entire time that I did that. But Christian
You had
McCaffrey at
4
307.
running backs before you took a wide receiver.
It's insane
that's something.
behavior. It's unhinged. A high T roster. High T.
I'm just gonna assume that you were 12 margaritas deep in Mexico still at the point we were drafting this. I don't know where you were on Thursday night, but woo!
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a little bit more.
I feel like Alfredo should wear the mustache if he's going to be drafting that way.
All right, let's
See what it's
get
like when
to
a joke hits, Alfredo. Everybody laughs.
Joey's not getting invited back. All right, pick that I love, but everyone else probably didn't. Well, that could be my entire team. But Dave, let's start with you. Who's the pick you loved?
You know, I made a lot of good picks here. I don't know who's going to dislike any of them. I really knocked this out of the park.
And he's humble.
But if I had to pick one, there's actually 2 that I'll say. Deontay Johnson in the 8th round. I think a lot of people are looking at his, he didn't have a super productive year. And down the stretch, he was kind of giving up some of his opportunity to George Pickens. So I think people are souring on Deontay Johnson, but he's a likely trade candidate, still 27 years old, still one of the best in the league at drawing targets. So I'm happy taking him in the 8th round. And I don't know if people hated this one, but I'm going to throw it in as an honorable mention as well. Cole Kmet in round 11. I got him as the tight end 13 off the board. I don't know why everybody passed on Cole Kmet. He was buried in sleeper ADP. I believe he was this tight end 17 or 18 in sleeper ADP, but he's been first or second in targets on his team every year he's been in the league. He's still just 24 years old. He's tied to the Bears through 2028, and the Bears are in a prime position to draft Caleb Williams, which is immediately going to be an upgraded quarterback. So I was kind of shocked to see Cole Kmet fall to where he did. I already took a tight end before him in Jake Ferguson, but that was just too good of value to pass on. Not another tight end was selected after Cole Kmet in the 11th round. So I don't know if people hate that pick or not, but I really liked it.
Anyone here hate that pick?
No, I hate his Baker pick more, I think, at ADP. Like, I don't hate Baker, but like at ADP, I think I would have rather went somewhere else. But that's just me though. So
let's say, well, I'll talk about that Baker pick in a little bit.
Okay, cool.
All right. That's a tease.
Joey, the pick that you loved, but everyone else probably hated.
I'm not going to shock anybody. It's Jared Goff. He's still 29 years old. You're younger than Dak Prescott. Went 25 picks after him. Coming off back-to-back seasons, at least 4,400 passing yards and 29 touchdowns. He actually had 31 touchdowns last year, even better than he was the year before. He's the Lions quarterback for the foreseeable future. I'm not worried about Hendon Hooker coming in and taking his job away. This is one of the best offenses in the league right now. I got the captain of that offense. I am super happy. Get him in the end of the 4th round, almost the 5th round. Let's go.
Yeah, there was a kind of an interesting drop off at quarterback after Jared Goff. Do you guys feel like he's kind of the last quarterback in that good tier that you're comfortable starting next year? Because after him goes Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins, and then it's like sort of JJ McCarthy, Dave Baker Mayfield. I think was kind of way undervalued here. Like I would have probably seen him go a full round and a half maybe earlier. I probably would have taken him closer to Kirk Cousins given where he went in this draft. But
they were within one point per game of each other in fantasy points last year. Similar ages, both former number 1 overall picks. And I think the thing with Baker right now, again, I was going to save this till later, but since we're on the topic of it right now, Baker's going to get a contract extension this year. And as soon as Baker signs a 3 or 4 year contract, why aren't we viewing him in the same tier that we're viewing Jared Goff? So that was one of my, again, we'll talk about it a bit later, but yeah, I was shocked. I think Baker and Jared Goff should be much tighter in ADP, and there was a 4-round gap between the two of them.
Dave,
would you rather have Baker over Goff?
No.
Okay.
But I think they're darn close.
Yeah, they are.
I like how we started this off as the pick that Joey loves and just turned into us praising Dave for his Baker Mayfield pick.
I told you.
I crapped on him before it was cool. Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Before it was cool. No, Joey, I actually really love the way you did this here, because I think a lot of people tend to go with the safer quarterback. Like if you've got one of those dynamic guys like a Kyler
did.
Murray as your quarterback one, you get the safer quarterback later. And I kind
Mm-hmm.
of love you did what most experts suggest, which is kind of get the last guy in that same tier if you can. I think I'd prefer Jared Goff over Deshaun Watson. And I think he's probably a bit closer to Brock Purdy, who went at the 301, nearly a full like 2 rounds ahead. So I actually agree with you. I love this pick.
The Watson pick was the one that I was like, because I was like, oh, here goes Goff. And then Watson went, and I was like, perfect. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah,
Man, Watson is one of the biggest. Like it's
you
a
nailed
good
it.
value
That's
there.
the analysis.
I mean, it's a good pick there at 407, I believe, where Jay got
Or
him.
409.
409. Yeah, I mean that's a good value there, but that's the type of pick that either you look like a genius or an idiot by the midway point in the season, because I don't know what Deshaun Watson's going to look like. Is he just going to perennially be a 12, 13 point per game guy, or is he going to revert back to the guy we saw in Houston? I don't know if there's a lot of room for in between. Like he looked terrible at times, but he also gave us top 5 production a handful of weeks as well. That's I think it's a good value where Jay got him, but the range of outcomes for Deshaun Watson going forward is so vast.
Yeah, I would have went safety as
Yeah,
well. I would have went Jared Goff. I
same.
probably it'd have been hard for me to click the button on Deshaun Watson. I don't draft Deshaun Watson. That's a no go for me.
I'm looking at my rankings right now. I have Baker and Goff both ahead of Watson.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
I would
Watson
agree with
could
that.
easily be inside the top 10
Absolutely.
8 months from now. The season could kick off. If he looks good again, if that injury is behind him and he looks like Deshaun Watson of old, we're immediately talking about him as a top 10 quarterback.
All right, Jagger, let's get to you. Who's the pick that you love, but everyone else probably didn't?
Man, I've been drafting him all season in like real drafts. I've been getting roasted for my Kyle Pitts love. He's still my dynasty tight end 3. I think that our feelings are getting in the way of logic. I don't know who needs to hear this, but I'm here to help you. Desmond Ridder sucked. He was not good at quarterback. He was not very good. And that is a huge problem when you need a quarterback to get you passes. Moreover, we already saw that Kyle Pitts said he was dealing with the PCL injury. We saw the clips going around Twitter that he didn't look as fast as he used to. We know he's fast. We have the testing. He just wasn't. It's not because he's lazy or anything like that. He was just injured. So again, when you want to talk about the all upside team, I'll click the button on Kyle Pitts every single time. I know everyone else may hate it, but I still believe, and I'm willing to look wrong one more year. Third time's
I
a
mean,
charm,
hey,
right?
the data backs it up, Jagger.
Yeah.
Led all tight ends in air yards, led all tight ends in air yard share. The target share was top 13, 11th in targets, despite being injured and missing some games. That catchable target rate, 64%. Almost half of the balls that came his way were uncatchable. I mean, just absolutely terrible quarterback play. So
Mhm.
I'm with you. I'm still looking at Kyle Pitts as an elite dynasty tight end.
Sweet.
Jagger, what I'm most impressed by is you worked in a moreover in that monologue there, and you rarely hear that nowadays. So kudos to you, sir. I do want to ask you a question, because the new offensive coordinator for the Falcons, Zach Robinson, he was asked what stands out to him about this team and the offense, and it's probably nothing. But it's one of those things that's going to be a narrative, and we got to talk about it. Is when he was asked about the offense, they said, "What sticks out to you?" And he immediately said, "Bijan Robinson and Drake London," and those were the only 2 players he mentioned. Does something like that, and I'm sure you're just going to say no, but how much does something like that weigh on your mind when you hear the offensive coordinator not mention a guy like Kyle Pitts, who probably should be right up there in that echelon with those guys?
It worries me, let's say like 25%, to where like I'm 100% all in. Now I'm like 75. I'm happy that I got him in the 5th round. I didn't take him in like the 4th round, like I normally would, if that makes sense. Like,
Yep.
and I'm happy that it's pushing down his value. But to me, I hope that this is a competent staff that you're at least going to try to get this guy involved. So,
Joey, I want to ask you, Kyle Pitts or Brock Bowers?
It's landing space. If Bowers goes to the Colts, I'll take Brock Bowers. It's
Okay,
kind of
let's talk
landing
about
spot
the
dependent there.
guys. let's talk about guys in the league then. Mark Andrews went 2 spots before Kyle Pitts. Pitts or Andrews?
Andrews.
Okay. Kyle Pitts or Dalton Kincaid?
Pitts by a lot, obviously, for me.
Hey,
I would say Kincaid.
Jagger, we're not talking to you right now.
I prefer Pitts to Andrews too. I know you weren't asking me, but I take Pitts over Andrews.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you, Dave. Joey, sorry, we all jump in when it's Joey's
It's
turn.
okay. No, it's all right. It's fine.
So that last one, Pitts or Kincaid?
Kincaid. I would rather have Kincaid. I guess I'm the one, Jagger, that needs to hear the Kyle Pitts. Like you were saying, who needs to hear? Yeah, I need to hear it.
I'm glad we did this, guys. All right. I'll close this out here. The pick that I loved, but everyone else probably didn't. And it's Bryce Young for me as quarterback 22 in round 5. And I get it. Bryce Young he went out and had probably one of the worst rookie seasons we've seen from a quarterback. And when you start to look at where all the analytics line up with other quarterbacks, it's not pretty. And I'm not going to be the guy here that also says Peyton Manning wasn't good his rookie year, because yeah, we get that. What I'm mostly leaning on here is something that our colleague here at Football Guys, Jeff Bell, said is I think this might be the cheapest that you can go out and get a guy like Bryce Young at this time, because he's so young, because he's got that draft pedigree, and especially in these super flex drafts. Dave, you kind of mentioned it that last year in round 2, where Caleb Williams is going at that 205, that's where you were drafting guys like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. And for me to get him here in the middle of round 5, I was kind of happy with it. And where I'm sort of hanging my hat on hoping he gets better is the Dave Canales coaching factor in Carolina, where we've seen him, let's call it fix Baker Mayfield. We've seen him fix Geno Smith. And I do think objectively Bryce Young is probably as talented as those guys, just from an arm talent standpoint and an accuracy standpoint and all the little intangibles that go with it. This was a guy that was kind of thrown into doing way too much on a really bad team last year. Now let's make some moves. Let's get him a coach that knows what he's doing and knows how to speak quarterback and can speak that language. I'm cool with that in the 5th round as my quarterback too. I do wish I would have gone with someone a little bit sexier there, but I'm happy with that. Okay. Now
I'll just say, I mean, over the last 20 years, we've really only had like 2 quarterbacks bust as the number 1 overall pick. And, you know, people are going to split hairs and say, well, you know, Baker Mayfield was a bust and Jared Goff was a bust. But if that's like the floor that we're looking at for number 1 overall picks, guys who have made the playoffs multiple times, thrown for 4,000 plus yards, like have started 5+ seasons on different teams, you go back 20 plus years. I mean, you really only have 2 guys to me that jump out as busts, and that's Jamarcus Russell. And that was when pro days were a new thing. And Jamarcus Russell wowed everybody with his huge hamstrings and his, you know, cannon for an arm. And it, you know, that was like the first televised pro day that really kind of shot somebody up the ranks. And then I think they kind of learned from that. Then the other guy was Sam Bradford. And, you know, he had a decently long career, but he was never really good. But you can kind of chalk that up for injuries more than anything else. Besides that, you look at every other guy who's been a number 1 overall pick, it's tough to chalk any of these guys up as bust. Carson Palmer, Eli Manning, Alex Smith, Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. I think the odds are very much so in favor for Bryce Young to bounce back, if not this year, within the next couple.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, I got the insurance policy. I went out and got Geno Smith in the 9th round, which, pretty helpful.
Yep.
That's like the general car insurance. That's like not the best insurance.
The general.
It's actually kind of expensive. It's actually kind of expensive. I looked at it. Yeah. I'm like, man, I can go to Flow from Progressive and have a little bit, like, no pun intended, more insurance with her than the general.
Shout out State Farm. All right, boys. Most likely to get traded off of your roster before week 1. This is our last category in the Dynasty Startup Draft Superlatives. So most likely to get traded before week 1. Dave, let's hear yours. And let's move a little faster with these guys because we still have a little bit more to do.
All right. This is Alfredo telling us that we're rambling too much here, so I'll make it quick.
Well, we're almost at an hour.
Yeah. Jahan Dotson is the guy that I'm probably trading away relatively quickly, and just talked about how much I liked him as a pick and how I expect him to bounce back. But like we said, his value is going to skyrocket as soon as they draft a quarterback, and I expect that to happen. So post-draft, after they land Drake May, if people start sending me offers for, you know, Christian Kirk or maybe George Pickens or somebody like that for Jahan Dotson, I might be inclined to trade him off of my roster, considering he's my wide receiver 5 as well. I went deep with wide receivers in this draft: Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Deontay Johnson, and then Jahan Dotson. I kind of view him, even though I like the talent and like the player, and I'm wearing the shirt, I still see him as a movable asset.
Quitter.
Thank you, Jagger. All right. Joey, your player, this one is intriguing because I like this. You picked a rookie, and unless this has changed, but I do really like this point here. You've got a rookie on here as a player most likely to be traded from your roster before week 1.
Yeah, so when I look at this roster, I think my weakness is, wide receiver 3 is Christian Kirk, wide receiver 4 is Amari Cooper. I like those names, but I'd like to have a 5th guy. I mentioned that I was going to go Keenan Allen after Amari Cooper. I'd like to have a wide receiver there that would kind of maybe I can pick and choose between Kirk and Cooper. So if Jonathan Brooks ends up like on the Chargers, the Cowboys, or the Vikings, I'm sending him off for a quality of a wide receiver that I think I could get there. Maybe I'm shooting for the moon, but maybe like a Michael Pittman, if somebody's loaded a wide receiver and they can part with him. So I think Jonathan Brooks would be the one player from my roster I probably would part with.
Anybody have any pushback on that, trading a rookie as soon as his value goes up like that?
No. Running backs don't matter.
Jagger. That's not nice. That's not nice. All right. Well, that kind of leads us into your players, Jagger, that you are most likely to trade for week 1. And spoiler alert.
It's Travis Etienne. Like, I'm probably trying to move Etienne in draft, especially once we get landing spots for running backs. I'd try to move him. I'd try to move David Montgomery. The other one, like Joey said, would probably be trade partners, is Keenan Allen. Because like as much as I love Keenan Allen as a winner, but if someone else doesn't have a wide receiver, I'm like, hey, I got Keenan Allen here. He's old tried and true, and then I can move him and then pick up some extra value.
So, Jagger, if you could, would you attempt to have a starting lineup with no running backs? Would that work for you?
I basically have so many dynasty rosters that are like that right now. I don't worry about running back till like week 3, essentially.
I want to get a glimpse behind the curtain here. Who's the worst running back you've had to start in a dynasty team?
Jahmyr White before he was cool. Like
before he was starting.
Yeah.
Dude,
Like
we're laughing. I can't tell you how many playoff dynasty teams I was in this year where I was relying on Jahmyr White and Ty Chandler.
Yeah.
Because I got through just starting any warm body, that was at a running back. And then all of a sudden, you just have this stockpile of RB2s, injury away running backs waiting for it to happen. And then when Ty Chandler and Jahmyr White hit late in the year, it's how you win a championship. You don't need these big name running backs.
And I'll load up on wide receiver and try to sell him if I need a running back. I'm like, hey man, I can barely start Zay Flowers because of all these studs. You
guys are disgusting. Running backs matter. You shouldn't be treating the running backs this way. But yeah, the player I'm going to trade is a running back. It's Josh Jacobs. And it's because I think there's just going to be a free agency bump. Whether he signs with a new team and people get excited, or he goes right back to the Raiders, people are going to be talking about how Antonio Pierce wants to make that commitment to the run. And right now, I just think that there is the uneasiness of players that don't have a contract that we're just like, I want to stay away from them. And to get Josh Jacobs where I did, for I guess a lot of other people, he would have been their running back 1. For me, he was my running back 4, which is the very conventional dynasty roster build. God, that's so upsetting. Jay Stein didn't take a running back until round 8, pick 9.
Jay Stein's a smart man.
I had 4 running backs before he had 1. That shows you what end of the dynasty spectrum I'm on. But yeah, I would be trying to trade Josh Jacobs because I do think that those players right now who don't have contracts that do end up signing somewhere, it happens to us every year. We get super excited when these guys sign somewhere. Just to throw it out there, another guy that's on my roster, Calvin Ridley as well. If Mike Evans ends up on the Chiefs, I think he's a great player to have for that 1 year window if I want to win. Joey, I'm sorry that I'm hurting your feelings, but I think people would go crazy for it. I think you're going to have a lot of win now teams that are going to want to make a big trade for him.
So here's what I'll say, Alfredo. You drafted Josh Jacobs in the 7th. I drafted Jahan Dotson in the 10th. If this were a real league, not just a mock draft, I think by week 3, you'd be willing to make that a 1-for-1 trade where you'd give me Josh Jacobs for my Jahan Dotson. And that's why
because I wouldn't have Josh Jacobs till week 3. I'd be trading him before the season starts. It's like you don't even listen to me, Dave. No more shenanigans. I liked this. This was good. Dave and I are going to be back again next week on Monday talking about the NFL Combine, our reactions from that, and we're going to be joined by a guest, Heath Cummings from CBS, former football guy. He will be with us to break down everything that happened at the NFL Combine and why it matters to you. For myself, for Dave, for Jagger, for Joey, for all of us over here at Football Guys, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. We'll see you next time. Adios.
I don't like when you speak for me.
Keep that in the show.